we tend to think suppression is the solution. Like, I'm just going to suppress that and it's going to go away. So for 3 decades, I just suppressed it and pretended it never happened. And in fact, when Kevin asked me, and full disclosure, I didn't go to a therapist because I was like, man, I was molested, sexual abuse. Over a 4-week period, as we built a relationship, I felt safe with him to somehow blurt out the fact that that happened to me. That led to 16 months of more therapy with him, unpacking all this. I think the first part of actually realizing that you might be operating out of fear, like I was operating out of fear. I didn't want to be hurt again. I didn't want to experience trauma. So why should I put myself out there to serve others, right? So you become closed off. But as you become more self-aware, so the first step to really getting away from operating out of fear is self-awareness, to realize like, okay, something happened and it's making me feel this way. Today, the word we use is triggered, right? Something triggers me and I feel this way. So self-awareness is thing number one. Thing number two is, okay, I've got to deal with it. I've got to confront it. So I've got to confront it. So you got to know what it is, and that's self-awareness. Number two, you got to confront it. And it's not just like, okay, well, I was molested, or okay, I was bullied. And how did that make you feel? And so if I go into how did that make me feel, how was sexual abuse that make me feel? I felt shame, I felt rage, I felt confused. Shame because I can't believe I'm so embarrassed that this happened to me. Like no one can find out. So I never shared this with anyone until I worked with a therapist at the age of 38. Could you imagine like what happened to me as a child? I never shared with anyone until the age of 38. Like what kind of soundtrack plays in your head when you're going through life and feeling like, man, I'm broken. I have rage, I have shame, I have confusion. So the shame was, I'm so embarrassed by this, no one can find out. The confusion was, am I gay? Did I make that happen? Did I encourage those 2 older boys to molest me? Like, is there something sexually wrong with me? Am I sexually broken? Right? And then the rage was, how the heck could this happen to me? Why didn't anyone protect me? Who were the adults who were supposed to protect me? Why weren't they around? So the only way I found that out is through self-awareness and then asking why and having a therapist there to force you into those questions. Well, why? What do you feel? I'm like, oh, I feel embarrassed, man. I don't want to talk about this. Okay, you feel shame. It's like, and then I would say, hey, Kevin, I don't want to talk about that. Like, I'm going to freak out. I'm going to rage out right now. I'll just start smashing your furniture in here. Like, I would talk to my therapist that way. He's like, all right, so you feel rage? Because to me, violence and anger was the solution to a lot of things when I felt those emotions. But I didn't know it was coming from that experience as a child. We tend to think suppression is the solution. Like, I'm just going to suppress that and it's going to go away. So for 3 decades, I just suppressed it and pretended it never happened. And in fact, when Kevin asked me, and full disclosure, I didn't go to a therapist because I was like, man, I was molested, sexual abuse. I better go and figure my shit out. I went to him because I was dealing with anxiety. I was just starting to get overwhelmed at work. I was dealing with anxiety. I didn't know how to deal with it. And my doctor wanted to put me on Xanax. And I'm like, well, okay, put me on Xanax. He put me on Xanax. I was like drooling out of the side of my mouth. I lost my creativity. I'm like, I don't want to do Xanax. I don't want to be drugged up. There's got to be a healthy way for me to cope with my anxiety. So he goes, well, you might want to go see a therapist and they'll give you tools to deal with your anxiety. All right, fair enough, check. Went to a therapist. So when I'm working with Kevin, it was just about anxiety and feeling overwhelmed and being able to talk through that. Over a 4-week period, as we built a relationship, I felt safe with him to somehow blurt out the fact that that happened to me. That led to 16 months of more therapy with him, unpacking all this.
Right.
Because my solution was, because he said, hey, what happened? Did anything happen to you as a child? I was like, oh, nothing. I was beaten by my parents, but that's normal when you come from a communist country. But what happened to me even before the beatings is even worse. And I don't even know why I threw that out there. But I realize now, because I felt safe with him. And he goes, well, what happened to you? And I just started crying. And I'm 38 years old, grown ass man, right? And I'm crying. I'm like, okay, and my internal talk was like, all right, this is stupid. And I got to kill this old man. Like, I remember thinking, like, I got to kill this old man because he's seen me cry. Like, that's the shit running through my brain, right? Like, obviously I wasn't serious, but I'm like,
He had a trigger.
I have to leave and never see him again because I can't believe I just told a fellow human that something traumatic happened to me. So he goes, do you want to talk about it? I was like, shrug my shoulders because I'm just crying and I can't stop. And I'm not even looking at him. I'm looking out his window because I can't even make eye contact with him. And he goes, were you raped? I shook my head, no. Were you molested? Shook my head, yes. Family member? No.
Oh, you couldn't even say it out loud.
I couldn't say the words, Kayla. And he goes, was it a babysitter? No. Male? Yeah. And then finally we got to the thing. But finally, when I was able to muster up some words, I said, but what happened to that little boy, I've already dealt with. Meaning,
That was you trying to cover up.
yeah.
And, be
And he goes,
defensive.
what happened to who? I go, with that little boy. He goes, that's called disassociation.
Disassociation. I know
Right?
exactly what that is.
That's the first step in creating multiple personalities. And when he told me that, I'm like, oh my God, I can't even say what happened to me. I said what happened to that little boy.
Wow.
And so the journey of 16 months of processing through all that began. And now I can sit here and talk about it. I can say that happened to me. It wasn't my fault. I didn't do anything to deserve that. In fact, he helped me realize that all young boys look up to older men as a rite of passage. That's just how it is. Knights have squires, and the squire's job is to clean the horse and clean the armor, and they look up to the knight, and one day they'll become a knight. As boys, we look up to the older men in our tribe. And so I just looked up to these older boys, and they took advantage of that. It wasn't my fault. And I can talk about that openly now, but
Yeah.
I didn't even know why all that happened in my head before, because I didn't want to address it. But after 16 months and a weekly visit to Kevin, I know why it happened. It wasn't my fault, and I'm a better person for it.